Welcome back, class. So today's episode is going to be a little bit longer. I've been getting requests on doing a deck building tutorial, like how to build a deck, what should be your ratios for foundations to attacks, and a lot of the questions, unfortunately, have to be answered with deck building is very subjective. It's very much dependent on the taste of the player, what they like to do, how they try to play. So I thought for today's video, I would go over a deck building 101, just the bare basics of how to build a deck. So if you are on your UVS Ultra and you've linked up, joined up for an account, you start by doing new deck. Let's just call this deck 101. And first, you need a character. But before that, I'm going to open this in a new tab to make things easier for myself. Cool. So the character I've chosen, as you can see on the screen here, is Stain. And I've chosen Stain because Stain is very straightforward. Stain says, as an enhance, my weapon attack gets +1 speed, for free, and if it deals damage, my rival loses 1 health. So obviously, I want to be playing a lot of weapon attacks. And then as a response, I can commit Stain after my rival makes a check to play a card, either during their turn or during my turn if they play a block. I can make that check to play that card get -3. Failing the check will not end the combat phase, but I can only use this ability if my rival has taken damage during the game. So, with my character, I know I need weapon attacks, and I know I need to have some sort of guaranteed damage or a way to push damage through, mainly throws or speed. And now that I have my character, we have 3 symbols here. We have the all symbol, the evil symbol, and the order symbol. So let's add Stain to our deck here by clicking this blue card and set 1. So now, when we refresh this, our character is Stain. So now I know what character I'm playing, and now I need to know attacks, because what I always go for first are my attack cards. So let's look at, wow, it's all the way at the bottom here, every card in the standard format. So I have standard selected. We're going to select attacks, and because I'm keyword gated with my ability to specifically weapon attacks, I can click this box here to look. It'll only show me weapon attacks, so attacks with the weapon keyword. So now let's see which of these 3 symbols has the most weapon attacks. We'll start with the all symbol. Click our search. There are 31 weapon attacks on the all symbol. If we choose the evil symbol, we have 40, and on the order symbol, we have 25. So between the evil and the all symbol is where I want to go. Now, if you're playing in any format other than retro, every card in your deck has to share the same symbol with your character as every other card in the deck. So for example, if I choose to play an all symbol attack, like say Arm Struggle, this has the all symbol. Every card in the deck has to have the all symbol. When My Hero Academia came out 3 years ago, they did change the deck building rules. It used to be every card had to share a symbol with your character, and then every card you play had to share a symbol with itself in a turn, but they made it much simpler. So we're going to go with the all symbol for this deck. So standard, all symbol, we're going to look for our weapon attacks. So the first thing we want is obviously any sort of weapon attack that probably has high speed, because in order to use our response, we have to deal damage at least once during the game. So we probably want high speed that we can add speed to. So now we'll go through and look at our weapons. This in our momentum can flip for 2 speed, so that's pretty good. We have a couple of other cards here. I'm not going to go through each individual card. I'm kind of just going to walk through the basics of how I build decks and kind of show the process of what we're going to do here. So let's look at some of Stain's weapons here. We have Double Blade Slash. This can give our rival's check to block -1, which can help make this attack connect, as well as stun 1, which can force our rival to commit a foundation, pretty much trying to make sure that this one attack hits so that our response will be live. So we probably want to add this card. And we can just add one copy, because once it's in our deck, we can add multiple copies by clicking on the blue card here, and we can add more copies of that. So let's just see what attacks we want to put in. We do have cards like Sinister Paralyzation. It's a little bit dangerous because it's got this 2 check here, so checking it would really be bad. However, we have a very strong ability to seal foundations, and we have an ability as a combo, which means if we play this after a weapon card, that can say that if our rival checks well trying to block this card, we can force them to check again. So I think we want to put this in there. Now let's see what else we can do here on the weapons. X speed, so that gives speed. That gives our next combo -1 difficulty. That's all for combo. We don't really want to lean heavily into combo. We want to just stick to weapon, I think. Honestly, there's not a lot great here. And sometimes you'll find that. Sometimes you'll think, okay, this is a good way to go, but since all we have here is Double Blade Slash and Sinister Paralyzation, and they each share all symbols with Stain, because they are originally Stain's cards, we're going to shift it up a little bit. We're going to switch to the Evil symbol, which has more options. As you can see, we still have the Toga options, but then we have some more different options here. I like Black Abyss Sabbath here, because we can spend a momentum. Our next check to play a card gets +2, and our rival's next check to play a card gets -2, so making sure that we are trying to make sure our attacks connect. Covert Black Ops is a good weapon attack on the Evil symbol here. What else have we got? Blood Moon Rending is a good one. Brandish Steel is a fun card. Laceration's a really good card. And I do like Piercing Needle. So let's take a look at what kind of cards we have so far. So we've got 8 individual attacks that we want to play. So normally your standard deck is minimum 60 cards plus your character. A lot of people will say you want maybe, depending on your build, not necessarily a hard and fast rule, but on average people might say 20 attacks and 40 non-attacks, something to that effect. It all depends. I hate saying it depends. I feel like a lawyer giving #NotLegal advice, but it depends. It depends on what you want to do. So let's just kind of fill this out arbitrarily, shall we? Just to see what we can do. We want that because we want more speed and damage. This is always a good card. Laceration's a good combo for us. Let's put that as a 3 and that as a 3. So if we have these arbitrary numbers, we'll refresh. We have 25 attacks, so let's try to narrow that down a little bit. What do we think would be useful? So I'm thinking, as much as I do like some of these cards, like the Piercing Needle, maybe we don't need as many of those. We can cut that down. Laceration, it guarantees with the Stain combo enhance, which means we can only use this enhance if we are Stain, that it'll always do 1 damage even if it's completely blocked. That automatically turns our character's responsibility on. We really want that, so we know we want to have more of that. So when you're looking at your card numbers, your amounts, the more you want to see that card, the more important it is to your strategy. That's probably a card you want to add more copies of. If it's something that, you know, this is kind of cool, kind of neat, but not necessarily necessary, you could probably afford to run less of it. But if it's something that you really want, you really think this is going to be really good for your abilities, then you might want more of it. So now, let's see, we've got a lot of stuff. Honestly, looking at our things, I'm seeing now that the Brandish Steel, while having nice damage, isn't necessary, so we can cut that out completely. And what happens when you do that is you just go to your set here, click 0, it'll delete the card from your deck. So now, that puts us at 21 attacks. So, let's leave that the attacks there for now, and let's see what other non-attack cards we can get. Again, the more important a card is to your strategy, that's probably one you want more copies of in your deck. So personally, after attacks, I like to go in kind of a backwards order to the assets, then the actions, then the foundations. So let's take a look at evil assets next. Are there any assets that could boost our game plan or otherwise help us out? Assets are different from foundations because, unlike foundations, you cannot commit them to pass checks. They're strictly here for their abilities. So the way I look at assets is it has to do something I need or something that my foundations are incapable of doing to either progress my strategy or have a very strong defensive ability. And one of the best defensive assets in the game, I think, is Aerie. Because she says, with her response, instead of killing me, your attack that would kill me is only going to leave me at 1 health instead of 0, which is amazingly defensive. So we're going to put 1 Aerie in the deck. And then I also like Twisty Surroundings for Stain, because Stain has this main attack line of you want to give your weapons more speed so that they can deal that extra 1, cause your rival to lose that extra 1 health whenever they hit. A good way to do that is to make sure that your rival's foundations, they commit as many foundations on their turn as possible. And with Twisty Surroundings, when they try to play an attack, I can commit Twisty Surroundings to give that check to play that attack -2. And either they fail that attack and it doesn't end their combat phase, which means I survive that attack, it doesn't do any damage, or they have to commit more resources to play that attack. Plus it's got Breaker 2, which means if I block with it, their next check to play a card gets -2. So again, forcing them to use more resources on their turn, so that on my turn, their defenses are wide open. So let's put 2 Twisty Surroundings in here. I really like that. And I think that's going to be it for our assets. Just because unless you're a character that specifically needs assets, like Mei Hatsume or Mimic, you don't want to overload on them simply because you cannot commit them to pass your checks. So they're more of a quality over quantity type of card for me. So now let's move on to our action cards. What kind of actions do we have on Evil? We have the new Hotness, Decay Awakened. We should always run Barrier Shield. I don't care what your character is, if you're running the Evil, Fire, or Void symbols, you should be running minimum 2 Barrier Shields. It reduces the rival's speed to 0 on 1 attack, and gives the next card you play Breaker 2. So just like we said with the Breaker 2 on Twisty Surroundings, this card turns any card in your hand into a Breaker 2, which is really, really powerful. And then Showdown. Let's put Showdown in here at a 2 of. Because Showdowns is similar to a Breaker 2. When you block with it, you can selectively commit 2 of your rival's foundations. So there's that strategy of, because we want our attacks to hit as often as possible, forcing our rival to commit foundations on their turn is optimal. So let's see what we have here. We have 3 assets, 5 actions, and 21 attacks. So that puts us at 29 cards. Not a bad start. Blood Curdle is fun simply because it's Stain, but for right now, let's leave it alone. So now we go on to the meat of the deck, which is going to be your foundation cards. Again, we're still on the evil symbol, and we're looking for cards that help weapon cards, or that help commit our rivals' foundations so that they cannot block our weapon cards properly. So what we could do is we could type in weapon in the card text box, And when we click search, we see there are 6 foundations that say weapon in their description, so they deal specifically with weapon cards. So what you could do is just add all of these and then see which ones work for you or which ones don't. I do not necessarily run that way. I will look at these. So like this one's really good, perceived weakness. This is automatically probably going to be a 4 of, because it's a playable while committed ability. And it says if our rival has lost health this turn, we can flip this and our weapon attack gets more speed and damage. So this is something that's not only a good 1 difficulty move, which usually as the difficulty goes up, the more powerful the card will be. However, the harder that card will be to play early on. So you don't want to overload your deck with 3 difficulty foundations and all 2 difficulty foundations, because that makes an early build turn really difficult. Because then if you check a 3, if you play 3 2 difficulty foundations, you're playing them on a 2, on a 3, on a 4. If on that 4 you check a 3 and your character's committed, that foundation goes away and you are left with only 2 foundations. So you do want to have a good number of 1s and 0s, what are called spam foundations in the local terminology, to make those build turns really easy. Much easier for you. Let's refresh this. We have our 4 perceived weakness. And instead of just going with the weapon cards, we're just going to look at all of our evil foundations. And we are going to see what we would want to play. Okay, here's an example of a good 3 difficulty foundation. As a form, so during our turn, we can commit this card, discard a card, draw a card. So we get rid of a card we don't want in our hand, like a foundation we can't play or don't want to play. Hopefully draw another attack, and our rival's next check gets -2. So again, making it hard for them to block. We will want at least 2 of this card. Personal reload is fine, because we can get, again get that cycle draw, discarding a card to draw a card, and our weapon attack is going to get +1 speed for our trouble. So that's really, really good. With decks like this where you want to absolutely push your damage, at the very least your first damage through, to make sure that that response is now online, speed is key. However, we will also need damage, and Pressured by All for 1 is really solid damage. It has got a lower check. On a foundation, a lower check usually means a higher powered card, and we can destroy 2 of our foundations to give our weapon attack +3 damage. So we will probably want 2 of these, because it is unique, which means we're only allowed to have 1 copy of it in our stage at a time. However, this is also what we would consider a lock breaker, a way to get us out of deadlock or having 11 or more foundations, because deadlock abilities cannot be used unless your rival has at least 11 foundations, and deadlock abilities are incredibly powerful. So you always want to include a couple of ways to keep yourself out of deadlock, ways to remove your foundations or destroy them. So, having the deadlock avoiding abilities of Pressured by All for 1 is a really solid choice for us. We also have Rifle Arm here, which can give +2 or -2 speed, or, if it's the only card in its owner's card pool, the attack that we're giving the speed to, we can give it +3 or -3 speed instead, so we would want definitely more speed. Let's see, after we make a check, it gets +2 if our character is committed. We don't need to worry too much about that. So, another thing you'll usually want, because if your attacks do damage, you're allowed to, at the end of the turn, take them as momentum, placing them face down underneath your character. These act as ammunition for effects like Powerful, EX, or anything like Black Abyss Sabotage that says spend 1 momentum. Now, you'll usually want to have these types of momentum outs so that you have a reason to use your momentum. We have Piercing Needles EX3, so for each momentum we spend to pay the cost of EX3, this attack is going to get +3 speed. And then for Black Abyss Sabbath, we can spend a momentum to give our check +2 and our rival's check -2. And then we have Airy, who spends a momentum to keep us alive to make sure we survive that last big attack. However, This is all we have so far in terms of our momentum outs. So it would probably be a good idea to add some defensive momentum outs, like Condescending Explanation. As our first enhance during a rival's attack, we can remove this card, spend a momentum, and turn that attack face down in their card pool, which aborts it. It means it doesn't resolve, and it can't do any damage. There's no more enhance step. It just is a dead card in their card pool that clogs their card pool, so they have to deal with progressive difficulty. So adding 1 to 2 copies of this is never a bad idea. Let's see, Fighting for Control. This is another card that can go with our secondary strategy of reducing our rival's checks. Our primary abilities are to give our weapons attack speed, and then every time our weapon attack hits our rival, they lose 1 additional health. And then our secondary ability gives a check -3. So in going with the theme of our second ability, we can use Fighting for Control to give our rival's check to play a non-foundation card -2. So that's a very strong way to both keep in theme with our character, but also to hamper our rival's abilities. Sadistic Jeer is always fun, because if your rival has 8 or more foundations, your attack can get +2 speed and +2 damage. So we'll want to throw some of those in there. And if I had any way to speed up our... I'm not good at editing yet, so you're kind of just going to watch this as it happens. So there may be periods where I'm not talking too much, and because I know what all of these do, I'm just gliding through this. Defending Pageant Queen is good speed hate, because you don't want to focus too much on your offense. Even if you're a hyper-aggressive deck, you don't want to die because you messed up your math. So you always want to put at least a couple of defensive cards like Defending Pageant Queen or Barrier Shield, that can make your rivals' attacks much easier to block, so that you can survive on those crackback turns, as it were. We're not going to worry about that. Not going to worry about a lot of this. We're just going for as basic as we can get, because this is just a basic how to build tutorial, and I'm trying to get to at least Convenient Timing is a very good defensive card. I'm trying to get at least to the point where I can show you how to maybe narrow your cards down. Refreshing Slice is fun. And if you see me adding only 1 copy of a card, that's a card that's not necessary, but could be fun. Like, if you see it, maybe it can do some really good stuff. And those are usually the cards you might cut first if you're really trying to trim the fat. But it's not necessarily like a bad card. It's just a card that could be fun, could be very helpful, but isn't necessary to the plan. I'm going to put in some Quick to Act for some extra speed if we're at less than half health. We don't want 2 more 4 checks. That's if our Fury attack is not blocked. I'll have to check our lock breakers here in a minute. What else do we got here? What else we got? Tech. Challenging the Fakes can be fun. Hero Killer is good, especially since we are Stain. There's some Speed Hate. Alright, what are we looking at in terms of card numbers here? Alright, so when this turns green, that tells you that we are good to go. Meaning that your deck meets all the qualifications for this format. It says MHA only, but that's because I've only put My Hero Academia cards in it. I didn't put any cards like Yu Yu Hakusho cards in here. If I chose to say, what should we put in here? Let's put some unsettling auras in here. This should turn to standard. So MHA only means you're only playing My Hero Academia cards. Standard means you're mixing and matching all of the IPs that are available in standard. So now we can go down to stats. I have 67 cards, 21 attacks, 38 foundations, 3 assets, and 5 actions. It says no characters, but that means no characters other than my starting character. So once you have your basic principle idea of your deck, what you can do is figure out block zones. So right now we have 30 high blocks, 21 mid blocks, and 16 low blocks. Now, this is going to depend very heavily on what you expect to play. I know that a lot of the main younger Toguro decks that were dominating the format for a long time were pretty much exclusively high attacks. So if you're planning on seeing a lot of decks like that, having a lot of high blocks could be really useful. Personally, I try to make these zones as even as I can, just to try to make sure that I'm not, if I see a random low attack, I have access to a low block. So what you might do is you might click block zone up here, and it sorts these all by the number of block zones, cards with those block zones. So you might see some of your attacks have some high blocks that you might be able to get rid of, or you have foundations that you might be able to get rid of. So let's take a look here at some of our high blocks. Personal reload's fine. So let's take... Alright, so what else you can do is you can load by difficulty. And now we see that we have a lot of 2 difficulty foundations. That's not necessarily a bad thing, but it will make our early turn, at least turn 1, maybe turn 2, a little bit tricky. So what we could do is, since we need to shave down some high blocks, we know that we have a lot of 2 difficulties, so we can look at block zones that are high that have 2 difficulty. So things like Hero Killer and Defending Pageant Queen and Fighting for Control. Now, Hero Killer is interesting. However, it doesn't exactly move our game plan forward a lot unless we're in deadlock, so this is a very good deadlock threat card. However, we don't need it necessarily, so we can probably afford to trim this down maybe to as a niche 1 of, so that if we see it, it's good, but it's not necessarily important. So that would change our block zones. It would give us 55 cards, so we're still 5 over the minimum. We have 28 high blocks, 21 mid, and 16 low. So if we wanted, we could look at foundations with low block zones and try to shore this up a little bit. We have Rifle Arm, which is good. Incubating is also very good. So let's add 3 incubating, and let's take out the 3 block zone. Surviving the Final. Because this, Surviving the Final, only works once per turn, for -1 speed for free. However, with... here it is. Incubating, we can remove 1 card from our discard pile to give -1 speed any number of times per turn. So, we trade a high block for a low block, something we have an excess of for something we're short on, and it's repeatable. It has the 1 more difficulty, but when you're dealing between 0 and 1, that's not too much of a difference. So let's get rid of those. We added those 3. This keeps us at our 65 cards, but now we're at 25, 21, and 19, which is a much safer ratio in my personal opinion. And that is a basic Stain deck that is ready to play. You are standard legal, because you're at least 60 cards. There is no maximum, and I've seen some people asking, what your deck size should be. My personal opinion, I struggle when it comes to minimalist deck sizes. I come from a Yu-Gi-Oh background. and I just could never play the minimum deck size because there's always so much more that I want to play. So I usually float between 65 and 70 cards. 65, 72 on the high. And if, because I also believe that if you have enough draw power, enough cards that draw you other cards, you can afford to run a few more cards in your deck, because you'll still see up to your printed hand size, so we'll draw until we have 6 cards in our hand every turn, because we're staying. But if you have more cards that draw, you can afford to run a few extra cards. I believe it was the United States Nationals last year. The second place winner was a Shoto Todoroki 1 deck that ran something like 90 cards, and he took second at Nationals. So it all depends on what your personal playstyle is, what your game plan is. There is no easy answer, and I hate, as someone who's trying to teach newer players how to build decks and play the game, I hate not being able to give you guys an easy answer. But all I can do is show you very basically how to look at your character and see what you want to do. So with Stain, we want to play weapon cards, weapon attacks, and we want to be able to hack our rivals' checks to make sure our weapon attacks hit. So we have all weapon attacks, and we have several ways to either boost our own speed or force our rival to use extra resources on their turn so that our weapon attacks will hit, therefore unlocking our secondary ability. I do plan on doing basics for other deck styles, like aggressive decks, control decks, so I hope you guys will bear with me on that, as I try to break down probably the most complicated deck building game I've ever played, or not complicated, but complex deck building game I've ever played, into something that hopefully you guys can understand. I hope I'm explaining this properly, but I hope this was informative in teaching you how to kind of analyze your cards, how to look at your deck, and try to flesh out as smoothly as possible on paper what your idea is. But honestly, the best way to figure it out if it's going to work is to build it and test with it. That way you can feel how the deck feels. You can say, okay, I'm checking a lot of 3s, maybe I need to trim some attacks out of my deck, or I'm not drawing enough attacks, I'm only drawing foundations, maybe I need to cut some foundations from my deck, or, you know, this foundation seemed fun when I read it, but it's not really helping me, so maybe I can replace it with something better. Deck building, especially on UVS Ultra, is just to get your ideas on paper so that you can build them real world and start practicing so that you can learn your cards as you play them. This is just your very basic step 1. Get your idea, and then form that idea into reality and watch it grow, which I think is the most fun. I've got a new deck that I'm going to be playing in my local store qualifier tomorrow as of recording, and I can't wait to see how that goes. It's a very aggressive Mirko 1 deck, not the one from Girl Power, but the promo character, which I've been trying to play for a while and just never bothered putting her together. So I'm interested to play that, and I hope this deck 101 video was helpful to you guys. If it was, please like the video and leave a comment down below. Especially leave a comment if you know anything that I can do better or I can explain better. I'm still very new to this whole YouTube thing, and I'm just kind of finding my niche as a new player content creator. Someone who wants to focus on you newer players and helping you get your feet under you in the game. So if there's anything that I could go over better maybe in future videos or something I can explain more, please let me know in the comments. Also, if you are on the official Discord for UVS games and Universus, I am there, UVS Hermit. If you have any questions, feel free to shoot me a message. I've been chatting with some people already, answering questions, helping with deck design questions. I try to make myself as available as possible to people, especially newer people who are just learning, so I love helping. So I'll help in any way I can. Until next time, guys, take care.